understand that thinking is a psychological behavior. You know, the nature of the mind and the nature of the physical body correlate with one another. The mind, expresses itself through the actual physical body as a template to express itself. So the body itself is a template, but the soul is from a higher sector, higher place. Now, when we look at psychology, psychology really is the interaction of the mind and how the mind works in relation to its environment, how it responds to various environments or various elements of people. So when we meditate, what we are actually doing is we are tapping into psychological responses that are happening during a sitting down period of time. The first initial problem which happens is the distraction of getting up, not meditating, not sitting down, not sitting still. All of these are aspects of the mind which then creates a vision to say, I must not meditate, I need to do this, I need to do that. And the first ideas that come into your mind is, I must go to the computer and email this person. I must go and get this thing before I forget. The best thing to do is to write down the things that you need to do before you meditate and then get down to it. Otherwise, just sit down in it, because the moment you sit down is the moment you want your mind to be still, So as the mind, as the mind thinks, the body follows. So we must go into the mind and still the mind, and then the body will follow itself, and you won't need to move, and you won't need. And let me tell you something. The moment you set your intention to stay physically still without moving, resist the faculty of agitating the physical body, and thus the mind will then begin to still. You see, in meditation, what happens is we can sit down in meditation for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. These procedures of time that we sit down to meditate is just a moment of section to observe what is happening psychologically. When we decide to still the mind, what we begin doing first is by stilling the body, making sure the body is completely still. When the body is completely still, it then has not got a reactive perspective of how to respond to its physical behavior. So I'm talking about the mind here. So that's the way to control the mind in the first step, because as you sit down, you are actually reorganizing your mind to just perceive and observe. So the perception of your angle of looking is where your meditation will follow. So the best thing or advice that I would give is that when you meditate, you want to make sure that you are completely observant. The first key of meditation is observation. If your mind is already still, then fly. You can just start projecting your mind into concentration. Thus, your mind will be focused at one point. You cannot concentrate on one object if your mind is flying from left, right, center. The mind first has to be concentrated in such a point that it will allow itself to then focus on another aspect of itself. So what I mean is that when you sit down, you want to observe the breath. So as you observe the breath, you can focus on the nose area, the nostril area. You just focus on the breathing in here, breathing out. Breathing in here, breathing out through your nose. And you want to keep your attention here. What that does, it creates a rhythm. in the law of Kabbalion, they talk about rhythm, and rhythm is one of the aspects which keeps your mind still, because everything is to do with balance, and rhythm is the faculty of the air element. The air element controls rhythm. So, in that sense, you then relax the mind to become still again. So, that is the first set of concentration. The second step to concentration is being completely observant. Once the mind then has decided to become still by observing the breath, or should we say observing stillness, it then is ready to observe sensations. It then is able to observe thoughts. It then is able now to perceive intuition, which will be the last step from the mental reservoir. So we then have to kind of create a source field which will align you. So let me go back into the various steps. 1, the body must first be still as a psychological response to the behaviors expressed. So the psychological behaviors are the physical body. How the physical body reacts to outside environment is how it will react when it's sitting down in meditation. So once the physical body is still, and once you control the interaction of the physical body. Now here, listen, we don't want you to sit down and then tense. The moment you create a tension in the body, it then creates a formula to create anxiety, stress, sources of the mind which will just start going off itself. So that means, your body will appear to be still, but your muscles will be tensed. So you must relax your face, relax your body, relax everything. Just imagine yourself relaxing. Then you get into concentration where you focus on your breath, but your body must be still. If you feel like itching, don't itch. Let it be there. Firm it and observe it. And that way you create more stillness, you create more inner power, you create more strength in yourself. So from the physical part, we then know now, once you've completed or mastered that aspect of meditation of keeping the body still, we then simply move on to sensations. Because the next, we could say that controlling the physical body in its first mental behavior is actually a form of sensation. Now let me differentiate from sensation into the observation of emotions. So now that we've understood that the body must be still, we then create the formula which would then form the mind to observe sensations and emotions. The mind and the body is, works together because, mind, body and soul, they all interact with one another. The mind now has to observe emotions which are circulating in such a behavior that it wants to make you follow those thoughts. What you now have to do is have to watch each individual emotional thought as a sensation in the body. So this leads back to the etheric body in itself. So you watch the sensation happening to you, the feelings. You might feel a sensation in your heart. You might feel a sensation in your mind, in your head, sorry. You might feel a sensation in your arm. Whatever the sensation is, let it go. Observe it. Watch it. What you want to do is get to watching the feeling of the sensation that is coming across to you. So this is still part of the physical body, which is in touch with the etheric body, which is the energy side of yourself. Once you can observe that aspect, that faculty, that aspect and angle of your mind, you then move on slightly to the emotional body. Now here, you watch the thoughts within the emotion of that itself, which is projecting. So thought itself is where you want to get at. You want to observe your thoughts, because in meditation they say observe your thoughts. But sometimes that becomes drastic and difficult because what we don't realize, the reactive mind is in action. The reactive mind is acting. So it doesn't allow the faculty of the mental, reasoning, logical mind to then transform the reactive, emotional state of mind. So what we want to do, we want to take a different approach here. We want to make you understand what your emotions are. So once we've gotten past the physical, we move on to the emotional aspect, and we look at the angle and the perception of these emotions. You might be thinking about an argument that happened last week. Now, that argument itself is a thought. That thought within that argument is hidden behind an emotion. That emotion is the reality which you have embedded your mind into a trance state of reaction. That state of trance reaction is now your stronghold. It is your room. It is your next environment. It is how you feel. So you must observe what it is. So you must change your perception to what it is that you are watching in terms of a thought. So when you are being an observer, you are not actually creating a thought, you are watching a thought. So the paradox to this information might sound, wait a minute, you're telling me to watch a thought, how can I observe a thought which is a thought? No, the key is to observe what is going on, to not allow actual thought pattern to realize itself in terms of thinking, because the appearance of thinking creates thought. So what I mean is that the moment you project an aspect of thought, you then create another thought. So then it creates what we call trains of thoughts. So your behavior will create more psychological train of thoughts. So the key here is to observe the emotion of that thought. So you're thinking of an argument, you look at the argument and you watch it for what it is. You become in touch with that emotional argument. You actually watch it, you observe it, because the key is not to indulge in it, but the key is to observe it for what it is. So the observation of what it is vacates the thought, because what then begins happening is you separate yourself from an emotion by observing the emotion and its reaction to how it's affecting you. And the more you do that, the mind will then begin to readjust itself back into where it used to be, or where it came from, which is the soul, and then realize that, okay, this is mind moving upon its reaction. It is feeding an emotional need. That emotional need is not a part of me. See, you've got to understand that we are governed by planetary forces. Planetary forces in aspect are dominating us. We are in a form of emotional lockdown based upon, should we say, the moon? Because the moon is the most reactive force which is closest to the earth. Planet, moon, light, that reflects from the sun. So that light, that beam, which is a force field which is always kind of drawing our emotions to different aspects of different angles of reality. We are constantly contemplating upon the angle of perception that this moon is taking us into. This moon is taking us into, and this mood which is taking us into different variation of emotional needs. At various degrees, every 2.5 days, your needs change. Every 2.5 days, your needs change. So from 2 days to the next 2.5 days, your needs will become changeable, because this is the cycle of the moon which moves through every single zodiac signs. So this means that what you want to do, you want to sit down, you want to observe the thoughts. You want to observe the emotion of the thoughts. The emotion is what is stopping you from concentrating. The emotion is what's stopping you from reaching the point that you want to feel